I lost all hand coordination.
And this took place over how many days?
Over a couple of weeks, actually.
A couple of weeks?
Yeah, over about 10 days. And then I was admitted into hospital when it just seemed to progress.
What did you think was happening?
I had no idea. I thought, I was laughing about it first because it was just so bizarre, because suddenly I was walking around with this unusual gait and I didn't even realize it. And it was too bizarre to even be scared about. I thought, you know, there's something strange going on. And I was admitted into hospital July 1st, Canada Day, and I was in hospital for about a month and a half. And during that process, a number of tests were conducted and I was diagnosed.
So how long were you in the hospital before somebody came to tell you what this was all about?
About 2 weeks.
So you're laying
while they
there
were doing
for 2
different
weeks.
tests, yeah, yeah.
What were you thinking?
Now I was getting scared.
Yeah.
At first it was a big joke. It was something to laugh at in my speech or my...
I've had too many drinks.
Yeah,
You've made that joke since, haven't you?
Yes, I have, yeah. Yeah, but
But
I was...
2 weeks and now it's starting to get...
Yeah, I was getting very scared and very frustrated, very angry, and I wanted it to end now. I wanted it to go away. Okay, enough's enough.
This is enough.
Yeah.
And how did you find out?
Actually, the nurse came in and asked me if the neurologist had talked to me that morning, and I said, no, not yet. And she said, oh, okay, then I'll let him talk to you first. So then I knew something was up. Yeah, and he did stop by and did his routine check and was leaving, and I said, do you know what it is? Do you have a diagnosis? And he said, yes. And then I said, what is it? And he told me it was MS, and I had no idea what MS was, and I asked him, what is MS? And he said, multiple sclerosis, and he turned around and left.
He left?
He left. He walked out, and I'll never forget that because he just left me there, and I had no idea what multiple sclerosis was. And I didn't know, like, is this terminal? Is there a cure? What is this? How did I get it? But the nurse came back in, and she asked me if he had disclosed the truth, and I said yes, and she wanted to know if he had explained the illness to me, and I told her no, and she tried to make me understand that I was actually the third patient that he diagnosed with the illness that day, so it was tough on him. On the same day? Yes, yeah. So he couldn't handle it? Yeah, so I thought it's tough on him. He's not being diagnosed. Yeah. I'd be mad about that still. I was, yeah. I hope that's not your family doctor. No, no, no. No, it was the neurologist, yeah. And I have a different one now. A very good one now in my dad. So when the nurse finally made a bit of sense of it for you, did it sink in right away, or did you feel a bit of denial at first? I felt denial because, yeah, I thought maybe they were wrong. Do some more tests? Yeah, yeah. And I was terrified because the picture they painted in the hospital was a very, very dark picture. Tell me about it. Well, I remember the occupational therapist taking me down to a showroom that they had in the hospital for people with these illnesses. And it showed how you could have your home adapted to make it suitable for a disabled person. You know, they had bars on the walls and bars in the bathroom, and it just made me feel like this is the path I'm going on now. I didn't feel any hope. I shouldn't say they didn't give me any. But this was the world they were creating for you. This is what they presented to me. Yes, you are going to be disabled. You are going to need all these things. You are going to stop functioning the way you're accustomed to functioning. Yeah. What did they tell you about your health? So physically, they were predicting deterioration, obviously. Yeah. And what did they tell you your life would be like? Well, the thing was, see, at that point, I still couldn't walk. I was going for therapy every day, physiotherapy, and they had a wheelchair for me. I had to go in the wheelchair to the physiotherapy. That was one of the rules, the hospital rules. I had to be transported there. Otherwise, I refused to be in the wheelchair or use the walker. My mother came to the hospital every day, and she was my walker, basically. Like, I held on to her and walked, but I refused to be in that situation, and I felt like they were preparing me for the worst, when it didn't necessarily have to be the worst. Because in my writing, everything came back. You know, I couldn't write my name before, but it all came back to me when I went into remission.
Speak so clearly.
My speech came back. Everything came back.
Yes.
But the picture that was painted first was as if I had to adapt to this new way of living.
Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd succumbed to that? If you'd said, okay, I'm just going to fall apart, where do I fall? Do you think that you might not be in as good shape today?
I think so, because for the few years following my diagnosis, I was in a horrible state. I was depressed. I lived in fear.
Fear of?
Fear of having a relapse, fear of doing anything that would trigger a relapse.
Or a seizure.
Fear of pushing myself too far. You know, I was always paranoid. If I had a headache, I thought, oh my God, that's how it happened last time. I had a headache. You know,
Prisoner.
Yeah.
So what
and
happened?
I obsessed about it. That's all I thought about. That's all
How long would you say you were depressed for?
a good 4 years.
4 years.
Yeah, a good
How
3 or
did
4
you do
years.
it? How did you survive that? How did you wake up in the morning when there's that terrible feeling, I don't want to be awake?
Well, that's the thing, because I was told avoid stress, avoid fatigue. Fatigue is a big factor. You know, heat can exacerbate symptoms also. You know, there were so many different factors I had to be careful of avoiding.
Yeah.
And so I overdid the resting part. I overdid everything. I sheltered myself to such an extent where I don't think I lived. You know, I just existed, basically.
But I need to know how you went from a person who was afraid to move out of your home to somebody who now gets on stage in front of hundreds of people, hopefully, and it puts herself into very, very stressful circumstances.
You know, I wish people would stop assuming that all rednecks own trailer homes, because it's just not true. Many are leasing.
So 4 years you spent sort of in this bleakness, and then what?
A friend of mine called me up one day and invited me to attend a talk, and he wouldn't tell me what the talk was about. So I was very cynical at the time, very suspicious of everyone, thinking everybody was, you know, talking about my illness, or everybody knew about me, and I was very paranoid. So my first thought was, because he's a financial planner, my first thought was it was a talk on investing for the disabled.
Right, great.
You know, that was my, and I actually told him that after, but it was actually, I did go for the talk, and it was about this series of courses called The Pursuit of Excellence, and they were all basically self-discovery, personal enrichment type courses, and I sat there and I listened to the moderator, and everything he spoke about just struck a chord with me. And it was all about finding a release for yourself, finding out who you are, who you want to be, what's stopping you from being who you want to be, challenging yourself to take steps to become that person.
So the exact opposite of what you'd been told in the hospital.
Yes.
Here's a room you go to and sit down and don't move again, versus
do something.
Fly.
Yeah.
What can you do?
And
what did you learn while you were doing this?
I learned a lot about myself, about my own fears of failing, you know, my own insecurities, my own lack of self-confidence that was with me even prior to MS, and now it had just compounded, because now I also had to be careful. So I learned about barriers that I kept putting up in my own life, you know, stopping myself from taking steps.
Why did you do that, do you know? Why do you think you were so hesitant to step out?